Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for your patience. I'm hoping very much that if you were here at 2 o'clock, you didn't mind too much me not starting until 2:15. It's been a busy old day here today. We started off with the boiler engineer coming to service the boiler at 8 o'clock. And then as the morning went on, I had an electrician here who had all sorts of things to do, including fitting some new lights and some new switches and an outdoor socket. And all that meant that unfortunately I was running late. So if you were here promptly at 2 o'clock, my apologies. So thank you very much for coming in and joining me 15 minutes late. Once again, I can see people are joining now. My apologies for being late. If you missed it earlier, it's been one of those mornings where I've had a boiler engineer here and I've had an electrician here, and I just wasn't able to start on time as I had hoped. So let me just check on my iPad that everything is looking okay. Just take me a minute to get in there. Oops, turn the volume down because you don't want to hear me twice. Okay, great. It looks like I am live, so that's good news. All right, so Stampin' Up updates. What's happened this week? Well, my craft room is messier than usual. I'm hoping you can't see too much of it. Actually, let me turn that around a little bit. There we go. That's not... I think it's slightly better that way. Hi, Mary. Hi. Mary says hello to everybody. I'm just slightly altering my position. That's a little bit better. I've got an awful lot of mess in my craft room. I had my monthly card class yesterday, which was a lot of fun. I had lots of people there. We were all stamping. It was, yeah, really enjoyable day. But I haven't got completely unpacked from it. So I've got piles of card and heaven knows what else scattered around my craft room. So that's a job for me this evening, I think. But apart from that, Stampin' Up news, there is a new kit to create a really pretty spring-like wreath. I'll show you that when I put the camera down. I've got a photograph of it. I, for one, am going to order that because I need some spring in my life right now. I know some of the plants and the bulbs and so on are slightly crazy and are out earlier than they should be, but it's still actually not very spring-like apart from that. Out in the garden today, it's very grey, it's very damp. It isn't as cold, but it's definitely chilly still. And I'm fed up with winter. I'm not very good with winter. I like the summer, I like the sunshine, I like a little bit more warmth. So I'm dying for spring, and I reckon that making up this pretty floral wreath is going to make me think of spring and take me away from winter for a few days. So I'll show you that properly in just a minute. The second thing to tell you is that there are some new items available as free products during Sale-a-Bration. We're in the last month of Sale-a-Bration. It ends on the 28th of February. And as well as the products in the brochure, if you've had all the ones of those that you liked, then next time you order £45 worth, so you're entitled to something for free, you might like to choose one of the new items that are available. Now, they're all catalogue products, so they could be something that's been on your wish list. And once again, I will run through those in just a minute when I've got a visual to show you and point to. I'm trying to think what else I need to tell you. I'm taking bookings at the moment for the March Fancy Fold Cards class. You've got until the 24th of February to book for that. And today is the last day to book for the March card class. So if you would like to do that either in person or by post, then let me know by today, the end of today, please. I stop working around about 5:30 on a Friday for the weekend. So let me know by then if you'd like to do next month's card class or card class by post. I can see Maureen has joined us. Welcome, Maureen. Lovely to have you. All right, I'm going to turn the camera down to my desk. Once I've shown you the visuals on those two things I was just talking about, I'm going to be showing you some techniques to use with one of the Sale-a-Bration sets in the country, and I'll tell you a little bit more about why I chose that and what I'm going to do in just a moment. So let's turn this down. I haven't asked you yet if the sound is okay. Now, I asked you that last week and the sound was okay, but then unfortunately When I uploaded the video to YouTube, the sound wasn't very okay. It was very much coming and going. Now, I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure that it was because I had on a funnel-necked fleece. It was absolutely bitterly cold. And I got on a fleece with a tall neck to try to keep me warm. But I think that meant that my microphone was kind of getting buried every now and then. So I'm hoping the sound is okay today. So let me know. And once I can see, okay, so let's have a look at that picture. You could probably do with a little bit less of me and a little bit more of my desk. Things are also, did click that button, but I don't think it's registered. Let's turn the camera around. Okay, it doesn't want to do that. There we go, that's better. So now you definitely want to see less of me and more of the desk. Okay, let's just tweak this a little bit. This always takes me a moment. You're always very patient with me. Let's deal with that lead as well. Take some of that extra out of the way. Still doesn't look right, does it? I don't have the world's easiest camera stand to alter. The one I used to use was easier, but it broke, and I could see why it had broken, which was on the camera altering bit. And I couldn't get one that was any improvement on that. I didn't get one the same or similar. I could do with a longer arm to hold my camera. There we are. I think that's about as good as we're going to get. Okay. So the Wreath of Blooms kit then, this is the new kit that's available today. I'm going to lift up my piece of paper to show you the pictures a little bit better. So this is what you can make. It's this circular wreath with these really pretty paper flowers on it. It's got some cord wrapped around the top and then for a hanging loop. These are all the components in there. Hoping you can see that reasonably well. It's not ideal from a printout, I know. There we go. And this does come with some adhesives. However, you are going to need a hot glue gun. They call it a hot glue gun. I mean, I think mine is technically a cool melt glue gun. I'm sure that's going to work just fine. But you're going to need that to actually hold your pieces onto the wreath, although they give you the adhesive to actually make your flowers and so on. But other than that, everything is in there. I think at £13, this is not a bad price at all. I also think it would make a really nice gift. And if you've got a couple of friends with birthdays, buying them one of these, buying one for yourself, and then getting together with a cup of tea and some nice cake to make them one afternoon, I think would be a really lovely thing to do. I also think they'd work brilliantly for teenagers. Teenage girls, I think, would love these. We've got Easter coming up. We've got Mother's Day coming up. So there are lots of reasons why this would make a really nice gift, whether you buy one and make it up and give it as a gift, or whether you give the kit and spend some time with somebody you love actually making it. So I think that's a lovely kit. So that's the Wreath of Blooms kit. And these are the extra Sale-a-Bration items. Now, the pictures are very, very small on this little poster they've given us. I'll hold it up and try and help you see. So there is the Kindness Cards kit. That makes these little, I think they're octagonal little cards. They're single-sided, a bit like postcards, but octagonal. I've made up this box. They're really cute, and they come with a really nice tin. There's the Let's Party treat packaging. I'm not holding this very well at all. Let me try and do better. There we go. Which is lovely for children's parties or children's treats. You could also fill those with little mini Easter eggs. There's the frayed ribbon. Actually, I should have got mine out. Let me just reach across and grab that to show you. There we are. That will be better than a picture. So this is the frayed ribbon. It's 7/8 of an inch wide. And if I kind of lay it across my hand and bring it up to the camera, it's got a ribbed effect on it, and it's called frayed. It's got this kind of fuzzy edge to it. It's not really badly frayed. It's just kind of fuzzy on the edges. It's lovely and soft. It drapes really nicely. You can tie it in a bow. Because of the width, obviously it makes quite a large bow. And this is one of the Sale-a-Bration items they've just added. You actually get 2 reels of this. And there are 4.6 meters, which is about 5 yards on each reel. So you'll get 10 yards or 9.2 approximately meters of this ribbon. And all these choices I'm talking you through now are available with a £45 spend. Okay, let's fold those back. We've done those. There's the Essential Tag Punch. There's the Songbird Builder Punch. There are 2 embossing folders. One is Into the Clouds. This is lovely. It's very finely detailed. You've got clouds and kind of texture in the sky. That's beautiful to use with anything that you stamp, like, you know, trees and landscapes and that sort of thing. Anything to do with flying birds or kites or hot air balloons. It's a really nice folder. There's the Hive 3D embossing folder. This is a very dimensional one with hexagons on it. It's like, what do you call it? You know, all the hexagonal cells that bees make and fill up with honey. So if you've got bee stamps or floral stamps, it's particularly appropriate, but it's just a really interesting texture. It's great for men's cards as well, that one. You can also get the pack of the Loveliest Layers decorative masks. So these 4 here layer together to create flowers with lots of layers of colour, and then you've got a background one in there as well. And there's also this beautiful Enjoy the Journey paper. You've seen me waxing lyrical about that in the past. This is in the new mini catalogue, so you can get a pack of that as well, which is really beautiful. And then added on for a £90 spend is the Eden's Garden bundle. So this is stamps and dies. There's words in there. There are botanical stamps. The dies are beautiful. You've got this beautiful die cut frame in 2 sizes. You've got border dies, you've got a label die, and then you've got a little kind of leafy die here as well. So with a £90 spend, those are available too. Now, it's really important that if you want one of those items for your free Sale-a-Bration choice, that you use the special item numbers. If you're ordering online and you use the numbers in your catalogue, then you will get charged for them, and we don't want that. So you need to use the special item numbers. If you're ordering online and you go to the Sale-a-Bration section, you'll find these items there with the special order, special item numbers there. So look in the Sale-a-Bration section rather than in the normal sections of my online shop. Or you can obviously contact me and I can let you have them. And if you're placing your order with me, I will make sure that the correct item number goes in. So if you'd like me to place your order for you, I'm always happy to do that. You can order yourself online here, or you can email me your order there and I will place it for you. So I think that is all today's announcements. So let me clear the decks a little bit. And I'm going to bring in the In the Country stamps. So quite a few of you, I know, certainly a few of you, if you're my customers, already have ordered these. And you may well have them already. If you're not one of my customers, you may have ordered them. They're available free with a £45 order. They're these beautiful line drawings of rural scenes. I've probably got some shine on that because we've got a plastic cover. So there's this one here, which is a pathway with trees and a fence. And this one here at the top, which is a set of steps going up with lots of pots of plants and a doorway. This one reminds me of the Mediterranean particularly. This one reminds me more of Northern Europe. So we've kind of got lots of geography covered in these stamps. Maureen says hello to everyone. She says the sound is okay. Brilliant. Thank you so much for letting me know, Maureen. And Marjorie is here as well, and she says hello to everybody too. Okay, and I can see others are watching, but I haven't got comments from them, at least not yet. So I'm going to use these two stamps. They're quite large. I've got them on my E blocks here. And if I put my hand down, I've got kind of average sized hands. Hopefully you can see the sort of size of the stamps there. Now I've got several techniques to show you today. I'm going to show you finished samples using them, but I'm not actually going to make up the finished projects live with you because I wanted to focus on the techniques, because it's very easy to look at these and think, well, they're lovely and I can just stamp them, but what do I do next? But they're actually perhaps more versatile than you think. So let me bring in my bits and pieces here. The first technique I'm going to show you is spotlighting. Now this may or may not be new to you. I hope it's new to some of you. So with spotlighting, you stamp an image and then you stamp it a second time, cut out part of it and colour it, and then add that piece on top of your original image. So here's my finished project. And my doorbell's just gone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that there for you to look at while I go and answer the door. I'm so sorry. There's nobody here but me. Right, I'm so sorry about that. It wasn't even for me. It doesn't look like it's for anything very exciting. It's for my husband. So, right, back to spotlighting. We're nothing if not professional here. Okay. So hopefully you can see what I've done here is I've stamped my image and then we've got a little section of it coloured. I'll come back to this finished card at the end and tell you what else I used on it, but let's show you the technique. I also have a measurement sheet which I'll show you at the end. So I have just some white card here, which is going to be the piece that I would use on my finished project. And I'm going to use this set of steps stamp. I'm inking it with basic grey because I like that sometimes instead of black as my outline. It's a little softer than black. I was talking to Mary this morning about basic grey, weren't we, Mary? You were saying that you like it as well. So that's my stamped image. There's lots of detail on these. They're very finely etched images. They're beautiful. And then I'm going to ink my stamp again and stamp it just onto some scrap card. Oh, I don't believe this. That is the doorbell again. This is unbelievable. Right, I better go and get that. It might be important. Bear with me. Right, let's see if we can get through the rest of this afternoon without an interruption. Okay, so I've stamped that again just on some scrap card. And now what I need to do is decide on the area that I want to spotlight. Now my favourite part of this image is the section here, which is at the top of the steps. It's got a couple of pot plants and some greenery kind of coming down the side. So that's the area I'm going to cut out and colour. So I've got my layering circles dies here. This is the second smallest circle, but it doesn't matter what size piece you use. You could use a circle punch if you've got it, and it doesn't have to be a circle, it can be any shape you like. And then I lay that on here and decide which section I'm going to cut out, and then I run that through my die cutting machine. Now my die cutting machine takes up a lot of space under the camera and you can't see it very well, so what I've done is cut one already. Here we are, one I prepared earlier. So this is my little section that I have cut out. So I've got the little pot plants, I've got some of the greenery, I've got the slope of the steps. There we are. And I'm going to colour that in. Now I'm going to use Stampin' Blends to colour this in because they are my favourite colouring medium. I like lots of other ones, but these are the one that I come to again and again. If you're using Stampin' Blends markers, you definitely want to stamp in a water-based a water-based ink, because if you stamp in StazOn and then you try and colour it in with these, then you are going to find that your ink smudges and runs. And I'm not going to colour in all of this. That was grey granite. Let's come in. These are some of the, I'm trying to think what we call them in the catalogue. These are not on the ink pages. These are with the other colouring mediums. And they're designed to give you skin tones. But I really like them for animals. And in this case, for these little terracotta pots. These two particular ones are number 600 and number 500. And then let's just do a little bit of greenery very quickly. This is the light evening evergreen Stampin' Blend. There's a kind of an aloe plant there. And then I think of this one as a geranium. If you've ever been to the Mediterranean, you know that you see a lot of geraniums kind of cascading down the buildings. And again, I'm not going to colour everything. This is the dark melon mambo, which is my favourite colour for geraniums. I love this really deep cerise pink. So there we go. Let's add a few flowers in. So I've coloured about half of that. Oops, try and, there we go. Will that focus on that? There we are. So what I now do is a little bit of kind of jigsaw puzzlery. So I need to put this onto my whole illustration, my whole image, and just get it in exactly the same place that it came from. And then I glue it down flat, or I can add some dimensionals to the back just to raise it up a little bit. So I'm going to do that. I quite like it raised. And of course I would colour the whole of this circle. If you want, you can cut another shape. In this case it would be a circle, but if you've used a square to cut your little image out, then it would be a square in a contrasting colour, so one just a little bit bigger that you can mount behind this piece, and then you would stick that down and you would have a border around the circle. But I've just left mine as the circle, and let's see if I don't move it too fast, see if it will focus in on this for you. So there we are. That's my circle piece added back. So it's very easy to do. And I'll show you the finished card. Just trying to get rid of these little pieces of dimensional. Here we are. So here again is my finished card. So I'll lift it up a little bit higher so you can't see it all, but you can see where I've added this coloured circle in. And then I'll bring it back down so you can see the whole card. And these were my measurements. So my card that I've stamped on was 4 7/8 by 3 3/8. And then I put a piece of pear pizzazz behind. And that pear pizzazz is 5 by 3.5 inches. I also had the scrap that I stamped that extra piece on. My basic grey layer is 5.5 inches by 4, and my card base is 7 inches by 10 inches, scored at 5 inches, and that's given me a 5 by 7 card base. My insert is just 1/2 inch smaller, so it's 6.5 inches by 4.5 inches. And then to add a little bit of kind of textural interest, I've stamped around the edge of my card base and around the edge of that pear pizzazz layer with pear pizzazz ink and this image from the Artistically Inked stamp set. And it's like marbling ink dropped onto water. That's what it looks like to me. But it gives you this beautiful texture and adds some interest there. And then I've used the Thinking of You stamp from Quiet Meadow. So I've just stamped that on the bottom. So that is my spotlighting card. Now this would work with the other image in here as well. You could do it with either of those. I'm going to clean my stamp off. Let's pop that aside. I'll bring that back at the end. And then the next technique, I've seen it called various things. The one I learnt it as is something called triple time stamping, because you stamp across 3 layers of card. So the white card, I have 3 layers of it. Let me lift that up and show you. So once again, I will give you the measurements at the end, but let's actually stamp this. Oh, excuse me. All right, so I've got 3 pieces of card here. And the first thing I'm going to do is glue them one on top of the other. I'm using my stamping seal. I don't want much glue. I just want a tiny dab. Let me just start that off. There we go. So just a tiny dab, because I want to be able to remove these pieces once I've stamped. I'm not measuring this. I'm doing it by eye. You could measure it. So I'm trying to get that in the middle of that larger layer. And then another tiny dab of glue, and I'll put that smaller one there, again trying to get it in the middle as best I can. So this time I'm going to stamp using the other image. I'm using Early Espresso just because it's a dark colour and it will show up well for you. Now normally when I'm teaching stamping, I say always stamp on a single layer of card. Now here we're breaking that rule. We're stamping on 3 at once. So I'm going to center my image and then just press down well. And if I lift that up, you can see why I normally teach don't stamp on more than one layer. You can see that where we've got the uneven layers, you get jumps or skips or gaps in your stamping. But don't worry about that, because we're going to hide those. So now I'm going to carefully take my layers apart. I'm going to keep them up the right way, because I shall have a bit of a jigsaw puzzle to do in a minute. You can see why I didn't want to use very much adhesive. And then I'm going to bring in 3 layers of contrast card and matte and layer these onto the contrast. So this is early espresso card. I've stamped in early espresso ink. Now on my finished sample, I coloured my stamping, and I did that before I separated the 3 stamped layers. But for this, I'm not colouring them, so I've separated my stamping and I'm just going to layer them up. And my layers are just 1/4 of an inch larger, both widthways and lengthways, than my stamped layers. There we are. So that's my 3 stamped pieces added onto their layers. Maureen's got to go. She's got a visitor, so she'll catch up later. So your doorway is as busy as mine is this afternoon, Maureen. Don't worry. It'll be here for you later on. Enjoy your visitor. And now I'm going to stack these back together, and you will see that, like magic, adding in that larger layer of contrast card hides the gap in the stamping. It also adds some interest because it breaks up the imagery a little bit with that contrast card. And as I lay these onto each other, again, I'm jigsawing them so that this fence line, for instance, comes along straight. I actually haven't done this one very well. I think that should have been a little bit lower, but you'll forgive me that, I'm sure, because it always feels a bit weird when you're doing things on camera. There we are. I'll put my thumb over there, okay. That bit's not lined up very well, but my actual sample is lined up perfectly. So can you see now that the gaps we had where there was a bump as we came off this layer of card onto the next one have been hidden by that contrast card? Let me show you the finished one where I have got everything lined up properly. There we go. Let's try and bring that so it's in. I'm doing these, it's kind of upside down and back to front. To get it right for you, I have to work upside down and back to front from where I think I need to move it, which is why I never get things in the right place, and I never move things in the right direction to start with. It makes me look like a bit of an idiot, but it's actually because I'm having to work in mirror image both ways, and my brain is not good at that. So to finish this, I coloured my image using watercolour pencils, and I used a blender pen just to blend out that colour. I layered everything up just as I've shown you. I wrapped some linen thread around this granny apple green layer, and then I put my 3 layers, my triple time layer, on top of that using dimensionals. And then I added, I knew I would forget what these were called. I think they might be called antique brass embellishments, but don't quote me. They're in the annual catalogue anyway. And then I used an espresso card base, and I cut it so that my fold is at the side. I find tent fold cards, if they are on display for very long, can kind of sag a little bit like that and look a bit sad. So I don't often make a tent fold card. I usually have the fold at the side. So here are the measurements for those of you that would like to know exactly what I did, and in case you can't read my writing. So my white card that I stamped on, started at 1 3/4 of an inch by 1/2 an inch. That was the little layer. The middle layer was 2 3/4 of an inch by 1 1/2 inches, and the biggest layer was 3 3/4 of an inch by 2.5 inches. Then my layers in between were just 1/4 of an inch bigger in each dimension than the white ones. So they were 2 inches by 3/4 of an inch, 3 inches by 1 3/4 of an inch, and 4 inches by 2 3/4 of an inch. My granny apple green layer was 4.5 inches by 3.25 inches, and my card base was 11.5 inches by 4 inches, scored at 5 3/4 of an inch. Now I'm in the UK working with A4 card, so if you are working on American letter size card, you will probably want to alter your card base measurements very slightly just to make most economical use of your card. But for my friends in Europe, these measurements will work for you. Okay, so let's move that out of the way and come in with something else. Now, for those of you that came to my January card class, we actually stamped this there, so you will have seen me do this before. I've just got a different colour to show you. So I'm using that same image of the kind of the rural road. And what I'm doing here is a quick kind of faux watercolour technique. What you need for this is a water-based ink. Now, our classic inks will all work with this. Basic grey works less well because it doesn't smudge quite as easily. So I tend to avoid that, but any of the other colours will work beautifully. So I'm going to stamp, and then fairly quickly I'm going to come in with a blender pen, and I'm going to colour over my stamped image. And what this does is it smudges the ink. Because the blender pen liquid inside it, I was going to call it ink, it's not ink inside it, but what's inside the blender pen is water-based, then it will smudge the ink. Now, we're often trying to avoid smudging our ink, aren't we? But for this, we actively want to smudge the ink. I'm working fairly quickly because once this ink has really dried well on the card, it doesn't want to smudge. So I'm working fairly fast in a very scribbly way. You can see I'm not being precise about this at all. All I'm wanting to do is get to that ink quickly. I clean the tip just by scribbling on paper. That is stained, but it's clean. And then if I lift this up, you will be able to see, I hope. I don't know how big I can get it. Oops. And just keep it in focus. That we have got a kind of a watercolour effect on that. I could have used a water painter, one of these brushes with a reservoir of water inside. And in that case, I would have needed to stamp on either shimmery white card or watercolour paper, because this paper doesn't like taking water very much. But you can get a beautiful effect using water. So here is my finished card, which is Evening Evergreen ink, and my contrast layers are Evening Evergreen as well. And then I used the brick and mortar embossing folder around the edge. I haven't actually made a note of these measurements. If you want those, let me know and I will happily have a quick measure and tell you. Right, how are we doing for time? Okay, all right, let me clean off my stamp. Karen says she's just got in and switched on, so she's got a bit to catch up on, but it's good to have caught me live for a change. It's a lovely technique. Thank you, Karen. I'm glad you liked it. And yes, the recording will be there. It'll also be uploaded to YouTube later on for you to catch up on all of it. Oh, I don't think I dried my stamp. I've cleaned it, but I haven't dried it because I'm busy reading out people's comments. Okay, let's straighten this up. Everything's walked. All right, now the next thing I'm going to show you is working with the stamps with soft pastels. And I've also got a little trick with one of our punches as well. All right, let me find everything I need. So the first thing I'm going to do is to stamp an image. I'm actually going to stick with this one with the fence again. And I'm stamping in Memento just to give me a nice dark outline, but I could use any colour for that. And then I have my soft pastels here, which are sticks of chalky colour. So we've got several colours in here, but you can mix the colours as well. We're perhaps more used to colouring stamped images using our markers, either the Stampin' Blends or the Stampin' Right markers, maybe using a water brush and some ink, or a blender pen and watercolour pencils, or any of those combinations. But the soft pastels actually are really lovely to use for this kind of thing, and I'm going to show you a couple of ways to use them to colour in. First of all, if you want to colour in a really large area like the sky, I like to use one of our blending brushes, and if you apply the pastel on here and then blend it out, let me just show you up here. So you'd normally scribble the pastel on and then you might blend it. Whether I use my finger or whether I use the actual pastel stick, I find that I don't get such even coverage over a really large area unless I use quite a lot of pigment, and I actually want a really pale sky here. So instead I want to actually apply the pigment with my brush, and I can either scribble that on here until I get a lot of dust. So I'm really applying lots of that, and you can see that I'm getting the dust here, and that's what I will pick up with my blending brush. Or my preferred way is actually to scrape the pastel with my craft knife. I find I get less waste this way because less of it is taken up on the paper. There we are. So now I can pick up that pastel colour, the pigment, on my blending brush and just gently swoosh it over the card, and I can apply a lot less of it using the brush and get a much softer effect. Okay, let me just tap off any excess pastels. So if I lift that up and show you, I don't know how good the light is. I'm getting some shadowing from the camera, which obviously is above this, but I'm sure you can see that this area here where I applied it directly to the paper from the pastel stick is much darker than here where I've just applied it using the brush. So that's one trick if you're covering a large area, and particularly if I don't want lots and lots of colour on there. Then I like to scrape off some of the pigment and apply it with one of the blending brushes. And then for the rest of the area, I can apply it directly with the sticks. And if I use kind of a corner or an edge, then they're quite precise. So I kind of scribble them over the area, and then I can either use my finger to smudge them, or I can use a cotton bud. Now I actually don't mind getting colour all over my hands. I'm still covered in blue ink from yesterday's class, and it's kind of a way of life for me. But if you really don't like that, then you can kind of smudge it out with a cotton bud on more detailed areas. Again, I tap off the excess pigment, and then I went a bit wild over here. There we go. With pastels, soft pastels, you're never going to get a really tight colouring of your image. It's always going to have a looser feel to it, a bit like the difference between watercolour and felt pens. If you're wanting really precise coverage, probably soft pastels are not the right medium for you. I'm just going to show you how you can mix colours. Now, if I want brown for my fence, I haven't got a brown, but I can make brown. So I'm going to start off with this bright red. So Mary is asking a really good question about, are the pastels set? She always has trouble with them coming off. Yes, I mean, it's in the nature of pastels that if you don't fix them in some way to your card, they will smudge and come off. Now, I have to say that these, once you have smudged them and kind of pressed the pigment into the paper, they don't smudge as much as some other pastels do. So your colouring is fairly well fixed into the card. But if you want to fix them further, you can either use an artist's pastels fixative, which you can get from an art shop or online. I recommend that you spray those outside if you possibly can. If not, in a really well ventilated room, try not to inhale them. Or you can also use cheap hairspray. Well, any hairspray, but the cheaper the better tends to be. That may yellow over time, but it's a very cheap option. And if you're sending a card to someone that's going to be displayed for a few weeks and then taken down, I think that's a really good option for your pastels. If you want something that you're going to display for much longer in your home, I recommend an artist's fixative spray. But you could try just not fixing them. I mean, where I've brushed that pigment into the sky there, that's really not coming off on my fingers. That's staying in the paper. So it depends a little bit with how much you're using and how you're pressing it into your card. I hope that answers the question and helps. And also you will notice that every time I tap off any extra dust, so that helps as well. So to go back to the colour mixing, I've put down some red. Now if I add some green to this, I'm going to end up with a pretty good brown colour. You can play around with which green you add. I've got this olive green here. And actually I've got some red on there, so I'm just going to rub off that extra pigment there. And because this is quite a small area, I'm going to go back to my cotton bud to blend those colours. And I end up with a kind of a reddish brown. I'm working very fast because obviously I've got a time limit. So I've actually gone over the edges a bit there. It's not my best ever colouring. But let me show you that we've got much more of a browner colour. If you ignore the red that went over the lines, if you look at what's actually inside the fence, it's a pretty good brown. You can also smudge these. Instead of a cotton bud, you could use a paper stump, which again you can get from artist supply stores or online, and that will give you something with more of a point on it, so it's much more precise for blending areas like this. You can mix the colours on the paper as well. Let's say I want to colour in my grass here and I don't want everything to be this bright green. So I can put down some of that green, smudge it a little bit, bring in the olive green. Smudge that a little bit. Again, tap off the worst of the pastel dust. And there we are again. So I've got some blended areas and I've got some areas which are the distinct individual greens. So how much of that is coming off? Let me just rub that with a bit of white card and see. Yeah, only a little bit. There's really not very much of this colour coming off. If you rub it well in, certainly the Stampin' Up pastels, you don't get an awful lot which will rub off. I haven't been fixing the work that I've done with the Stampin' Up pastels. I have other soft pastels. I do a lot of mixed media artwork, and the pastels that I use for that, which are sometimes I use a different brand, and they vary an awful lot from brand to brand with how much they continue to kind of smudge after you've finished using them. I don't find these smudge an awful lot, but as I say, those 2 tips for fixing it if you're having problems may help. I'm just going to wipe off my fingers, and then I will show you a finished project using an image coloured using the pastels. So this is my completed card. I'll lift that up and try and show you the detail. I'll wait for my iPad to catch up. I'm hoping that will be, in focus. I'm having to do that, move it the opposite way to which I want you to see it again. There we are. I'm going to tilt it a little bit so you can get the light on it and also get some of the sparkle from this lovely metallic paper. So I've actually made quite a large card here from what's a relatively small image stamp in comparison with the size of the card. So I coloured the stamped image just as I've shown you. I used the blending brushes with some of that scraped off pigment for the sky. And I actually did use the blending brush to kind of blend the grass, and then I added some detail with the sticks themselves. I blended the red and the green for the fence, and then I die cut it using the framed florets dies. So I used this die here to cut out my image, and it gives me this oval shape, and then I used the same die to cut some of this beautiful rose gold metallic specialty paper. Let me just take a sheet of that out to show you. It comes with 2 colours. It comes with gold and rose gold. It's in the annual catalogue, and it's beautiful. It's got a kind of a grain on it as well as the sparkle. So I die cut the frame from that, and then I glued down the frame and glued my coloured image inside the frame. My panels here, I'll give you the measurements in a minute. I embossed using one of my favourite folders, which is the Time Worn Type, which gives you a very subtle effect. It just adds some interest here. My stamped Happy Birthday is from the set I showed you earlier, artistically inked. It's this Happy Birthday here, which is a nice large one without it being too tall. And I added a strip of the metallic paper in between, and then I made these little kind of photo corner effect pieces using a punch they've called the Very Best Trio Punch. And let me show you how I did that. I've used this corner here. Again, I'm trying to get the light, it's reflective, so I'm trying to show you the shape without too much reflection affecting that. And this is not a symmetrical shape, so it has a scallop and then a straight and then a kind of reversed or a concave scallop. So we've got a convex and a concave with a right angle bit in between them. So if I punch 2 pieces of this, and I want to put them on opposite sides of my image, those 2 look okay, but if I put them on the same side, for me, because they're not mirror imaged, that looks wrong. Can you see I've got that concave piece there and I've got the convex piece there? However, when I punch it, if I turn my card over, I will get the opposite shape. Now, navy card doesn't actually illustrate that very well, but when you do it on the metallic, because this is metallic on one side and white on the other, it's a little bit more obvious. So that way I can get my mirror image this way, and then I can also get my one for the top. I'm hoping I've explained that. Okay, I'm glad you like the frames, Karen. Yeah, I think these are really pretty. So that's how I've made my little photo corners, and I actually continued them inside as well. So the measurements for that, let's give you those, are here, and once again let me read them out in case you can't read my scrawl. So my card base was 10 inches by 7 inches scored at 5 inches. That gives me a 5 by 7 inch card base. My two embossed pieces both measure 5 across, and then this top one is 5 inches down, the bottom one is 1.5 inches down. My piece of white for the sentiment measures 4.25 by 3/4 of an inch. And my rose gold strip in the middle measures 5 inches by 1/4 of an inch. And then I just used scraps of the rose gold paper for my corners, and punching it straight from the punch with the card the right way up gives me the diagonal ones. But then for the other two I had to turn my card over, so I was punching it with the wrong side uppermost, and then that gives me the opposite shapes of scallops so that everything mirror images nicely. I haven't put on there the insert. The insert was just 1/2 inch smaller, so my card base is 5 by 7. My insert was 4.25, 4.5 by 6.5. So that's my soft pastels card. And just one very quick final one, because we're coming up to the point where I should be finishing really. And if you were at yesterday's card class, we did this, but I will show you now, which is not really a technique, but it's another way of colouring them. So I'm using that one with a flight of steps on it, and I'm stamping using StazOn ink, because I'm going to get this outline wet, so I don't want it to smudge. StazOn ink is fantastic if you want to get your outline wet. It's important to have your pad well inked, to press quite hard when you ink your stamp, and with a largish stamp I always pick up the ink pad and take it to the stamp, rather than trying to ink my stamp this way and make sure I get it all covered. And then I stamp fairly quickly, because this is a fast drying ink, and if you hang around too long you can find that it's drying on your stamp, and then when you try and stamp you don't get enough ink transferring, and sometimes the card will actually stick to the stamp, and when you peel it off the top surface of the card has stuck. So ink your stamp well and then stamp without delay, and that will give you the best results. Remember too that because this is a permanent ink, if you get it on your clothes, it's a permanent ink, so it won't wash out. So just be careful when you're using StazOn. But with those kind of small warnings, it's a really nice medium to use if you want to use something water-based. My image isn't going to run. So I bring in my watercolour pencils. This is a grey one, and I'm just going to scribble colour. I'm not using any great finesse. I'm not making sure that I go right up to the line. I'm just going to scribble, because I'm going to blend out this colour in a minute. Now, the lines on the stamp are are where I'm going to add more pressure with my pencil and apply, therefore, more of the pigment. And those will smudge out, but they will be darker. And again, on my steps here, these areas with the heavy shading, I'm applying quite a lot of the pencil. And then the actual treads here, which are paler, I'm applying less of the pencil. I'm not going to colour the whole image, you know how to colour in, but I'll try and do just enough to give you some tips. So when I'm colouring things like this aloe, I think this is an aloe plant, it might be something different, I will have a sharper pencil perhaps than when I'm colouring a larger area where I like a blunter pencil. You can blend the colours, so in this set I don't have a terracotta colour. So if I put down some brown, that's early espresso, and then I go over the top in coral, then those two colours will blend when I moisten them and give me a terracotta colour. And let's just add, perhaps I'll add red geraniums this time, I gave you pink ones before. Just a little bit of red there, just a pop of colour in those geraniums, and then some foliage, and then what I'm going to do is blend out that colour. Now you can blend the colour out using a water painter. As I discussed before, if you're going to use a water painter, you very definitely want to be working on shimmery white or watercolour paper if at all possible. You can use this white card if you're super careful not to get it wet, but you really must get it only just damp. However, if you use one of the blender pens, you don't have to worry about that. And the fluid in this will blend that colour out really smoothly. Actually, I should have shown you. Let me pick this up before I blend it all. So here is my scribbly pencil and here is my blended area. You can see that it goes from scribble to smooth colour really beautifully with these blender pens. You can use them with ink as well, but they are fantastic with watercolour pencils. And the areas where I used the etching on the stamp to lay down, to guide me as to where to lay down darker colour, I've got darker areas, and the other areas I've got lighter. So you can get light and shade very easily with these. When I want to move to a different colour, so I've coloured the grey, I just scribble this on my paper. Once it's coming out clean, then I've got a clean tip and I can move on to my next colour. I'm actually going to swap ends on this. There's nothing different about the tips on here except that one I think I've used a lot more and it's a little bit soft. So I'm going to use this one, which, yeah, this feels a little bit newer, and that will allow me to colour in the detailed areas here more easily. So that's my terracotta pots. Those, the brown and the orange, have blended to form a terracotta colour. I'm now going to colour in, or go over I should say, the colour I put down here, this bright green. And then I'll just go over that red for the flowers, just smooth that out, and then I'll lift this up and show you. As I say, I haven't coloured the whole thing, you know how to colour in, but hopefully that's given you a few tips. And I'll show you a whole coloured image now. I've actually got two versions of it with slightly different colours. Show you this one. This one's got a red door and pink geraniums. And then this one's got a yellow door and orange geraniums. So to complete these cards, I coloured my image, then I die cut it, or you can die cut first and then stamp onto your die cut, it doesn't matter, using stitched rectangles. I took a piece of basic grey card and cut an aperture in it using exactly the same die, so the same size of die. So that gave me a piece of grey with an aperture cut in it, and I put that through the brick and mortar embossing folder. My thinking was that this is kind of an outdoor scene with a stone building, so I was kind of echoing the stone around it. And then on my card base, I put down my aperture frame. I used stamping dimensionals for that, so it's raised up a little bit, and then I just put glue on the back of my coloured piece and just dropped it in, and because I cut it using the same die, it fits exactly into that aperture, so there's no faffing around trying to get it all to work. I just put the frame centrally on my card base and then dropped in my coloured area. And then these enamel dots are new in the mini catalogue. Again, I haven't written down the measurements for you for these, but I can tell you if you would like. Just type a comment in and I'll let you know. So Mary's saying, thank you, lots of good ideas. I'm very pleased, Mary, thank you. Let me bring back, if I've got space, all the cards and show you the variations we've got just with these two images. I don't know if I can get them all down. Let's try and see if they'll fit. There we are. So in no particular order, here I used the chalk pastels to colour my image, and that's not coming off. So what I've done with these is I've rubbed them really well into the card, and they're not transferring. So I think unless you use a very heavy amount of the pastel on your card, once you've blended it and rubbed it into the card and either blown off or tapped off the extra dust, I don't think that needs fixing. I think you'll find you'll be okay, to go back to our discussion earlier. This one is the spotlighting method, where you stamp your image, you stamp it again on a piece of scrap paper and just cut out a section of that image which you colour, and then you pop that back on top of your whole image in exactly the same place, a bit like a jigsaw. This is the triple time stamping, where you cut 3 pieces of card to stamp on and stack them one on top of the other with a tiny bit of adhesive just to stop them moving, and then you stamp on top of that stack of card. And don't worry about the gaps in your stamping, because your slightly larger pieces of card will hide those as you layer your stamped images onto the card and then stack them back together again. And then 2 cards where we've used the blender pens. On this one, I've stamped it and then I've immediately gone over the image with a blender pen to smudge the ink and give me a watercoloured look, but it's much easier because a blender pen is easier to control. And then these 2 both use the watercolour pencils smudged with a blender pen. So lots of ideas there for these really nice stamps. They're still available free with a £45 spend. I think they're terrific for all kinds of cards. These work brilliantly for men's cards. Often men's cards are difficult. The subject matter is perfect for those, but they will also work for birthdays. They'll work for thinking of you. They'll work for sympathy. They'll work for a blank card, because we all need a blank card in our stash, don't we? So I think they're incredibly versatile for the different occasions, and you can use all kinds of different techniques with them. So I'm just going to move the camera back up and say a goodbye to you. Once again, thank you so much for bearing with me starting late today. If you missed my explanation at the beginning, it's because I had the boiler engineer and I had the electrician here this morning, and I just couldn't get everything together in time to start at 2 o'clock. So I'm sorry for the delay, but thank you for coming and joining me nonetheless. I'm checking there are no other comments. Some thank yous. Marjorie's learnt something new again. Fantastic, Marjorie. My job is done. Thank you, Karen, for your lovely comment as well. I'm glad you enjoyed it. So I will be back here next week. I'm going to pull out my By the Bay suite. I live very close to the sea, and I love everything to do with the beach and the ocean, so I'm going to pull out that set for next week. We've got seashells, we've got wading birds, we've got beautiful papers, so there's all sorts of things there to use, and I hope to inspire you with those next week. But until then, I will see you next week. Have a lovely weekend, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.